And thank you very much, Christian, for your nice introductory words. Allow me to also thank our hosts from the splendid Athirat Journal and its entire team around Dr. Mohammed Marakten. Simultaneously, our thanks go to those who generously sponsor this journal, members of the Athani family, first among them. So thanks again to all of you for making this event possible and for having me here. Could you assist me in? Yes, thanks. Within our present discussion of ancient Arabia's fauna, my paper and today's talk address snakes in Southwest Arabia, not mainly through the approaches of archaeology, art history, philology, or literary studies, but primarily by means of sociocultural anthropology. Hence, the core arguments of my talk is based on ethnographic investigations that I had the privilege of carrying out between 1980 and 1987 in certain areas of Southwest Arabia. As a sociocultural anthropologist, I'm primarily concerned with the ways in which local human residents at the time of research interact with snakes. The results of these insights, which I previously had published to a very limited extent only, but most of them not at all, are compared with each other, and at the same time they're also compared with two other sets of sources. This concerns first main accomplishments of Muslim scholars in Al-Mashriq during pre-Ottoman times, and second, the current status of knowledge about snakes in pre-Islamic Southwest and South Arabia. So what I'm doing against the background of knowledge and values concerning snakes in Islamic Arabic times between the 8th and the early 15th century Common Era is to interpret the relevance of ethnographic insights from the 1980s connected to this particular topic for their significance within pre-Islamic ancient Southwest Arabia. Along these lines, and with a spirit of appropriate modesty, my talk in the end aims at humbly and modestly contributing to what already is known about snakes in ancient Southwest Arabia by confirming and strengthening certain pre-existing lines of interpretation. At first, let us take a look at the main sites of these particular ethnographic fieldwork areas of the 1980s. There were several localities in southern Hijaz and northern Asir where I participated in the joint project directed by Walter Dostal and Abdurrahman al-Ansari in the early 1980s, together with my Vienna colleague Johann Heiss. In addition, I spent one shorter and in 1986-87, one very long solo field research period among Khawlan bin Godaa groups at the northwestern border on the Yemeni side of these two countries. So basically all these fieldwork sites are located in the transition zone between the highlands and the coastal plain of the Tihama, including some of those areas that our friend Dr. Faisal yesterday were referring to. This is where natural springs are especially frequent throughout the year, while during the rainy season, floods pouring down from the highlands represent a main source of irrigation. Within these remote villages at the feet of Southwest Arabia's highlands, the settlement of the Ain as the tribal border between Ghamid and Zahran represents one of those, as its name already indicates, that benefit from a perennial spring source. It lies above the main local oasis that you see here, extending in the foreground, from the right of the image to the center. This spring water is quite essential for village horticultural based on dates, bananas, and other fruits. The point of relevance for our discussion is that the spring is said to be permanently guarded by a big snake. By its color, size, habitat, and behavior as communicated to me, the snake has been identified by the Vienna natural history snake expert with some certainty as Cobra arabica. Older villagers maintained that the snake always had predecessors in earlier times. Sometimes it was even addressed by a proper name. The snake was seen as a guardian of the spring, to be respected as an envoy of Allah, protecting water as his gift to humans. Some said that the snake even might be what they called a white jinn, to be treated like a powerful friend. A few among the fairy tales that Werner Daum collected in central Yemen displayed different but slightly similar motives. Another instance of such positive and benevolent attitudes towards snakes is widely occurring in the hilly Tihama of northern Asir. There, snakes are understood as those creatures in wildlife that are most sensitive to the end of the dry season and the gradual return of the moist and rainy parts of the year. That is, long before this is noticed by humans and domesticated animals. Humans, therefore, are encouraged to closely watch and to observe snakes' behaviors as indicators of the approaching moist season in the local agricultural star calendars, as I already briefly pointed out earlier this year at our Rabat conference. The third among these fairly benevolent and positive connotations for snakes in the regional ethnographic settings of the 1980s concerns the so-called snake dance in northwest Yemen's Tihama margins. This is a prelude ritual, a separate introductory ritual in the morning of the same day when various villages jointly carry out the big or so-called pharaonic circumcision of their teenage boys in the evening. I won't go into any of the detail of this painful and dangerous ceremony itself, which was forbidden in Saudi Arabia but well remembered there, and partly also vanishing in the Yemen of the 1980s as well. So I'll focus only upon this particular prelude ritual and leave out the main bloody evening part, which I also don't want to discuss here, with the help of the following sketch. The sketch clarifies that the prelude, in fact, is an inversion of the main ritual. The teenage boys are not yet the main patients, but here, during the prelude, they are the spectators. The khattan, the specialist who does the circumcision later on, is not yet the surgeon, but in the prelude, he is the primary patient. And the boys' families are not yet the spectators. They will be in the evening, but here they are, if you want, the actual surgeons. Only the drummers perform the same roles as accompanying musicians that they will then also fulfill in the evening. The families of these 10 to 15 boys from 3 to 5 villages dance to the drummer's rhythm in a snake line towards the direction of the khattan who's waiting for them. The first family approaching him performs a symbolic snake bite and then steps aside while the next family in line dances closer until they become the new snake head. The symbolic snake bite is the imitation of a circumcision by hand outside the khattan's cloth that is covering his private part. In the village's interpretation, the Raqs al-Hanash communicates to the khattan, if you don't treat our boys well tonight, then you'll suffer from us just like the snakes prey. So make sure that tonight's circumcision opens the door for our boys into a life of honor, of wealth, and good health. This ends my short overview of ethnographic examples for human interactions with the life and the idea of the snake in the hilly Tihama of southwest Arabia. I have chosen such examples that represent more or less positive attitudes about the snakes, whereas elsewhere in the region, pragmatic and careful attitudes are prevailing. Examples of negative attitudes about snakes may occur in other parts of southwest Arabia, but not in the hilly Tihama, and only very rarely so. These are cases, therefore, as I have presented them to you, of a positive exceptionalism, not only if compared to elsewhere in the Tihama, but also if compared to many other cases in the scholarly and religious Arabic literature from al-Mashriq in Muslim pre-Ottoman times. The main point to be made today about the Islamic and pre-Ottoman Arabic scholarly literary legacy on snakes is twofold. Firstly, it is highly differentiated in descriptive terms, and second, it is highly pragmatic. Unlike the Jewish and Christian Bible, the Quran does not see the snake as the devil in disguise in the Garden of Eden. Although Arabic literature, of course, knows about this legacy in the Christian and Jewish traditions. But the pre-Ottoman Arabic traditions advise for a pragmatic, careful, yet respectful interaction with snakes. By consequence, our three cases of positive exceptionalism differ not only to a small degree from many other more neutral cases in the wider ethnography of the region. In addition to that, they also differ slightly, though not fundamentally, from the literary and religious tradition in Arabic Islamic times. By consequence, the three ethnographic examples of human benevolence towards the snake and its image feature some traces of closer affinity to the high status of snakes in the cosmology of pre-Islamic Southwest Arabia. The final step in my presentation today therefore asks in which ways the ethnographic overview from the 1980s may help to interpret the ancient Southwest Arabian legacies related to snakes. It has become experts' common knowledge since the days of Adolf Grohmann's 1914 book, based on the Glaser and Müller collections in Vienna, followed later by Maria Höfner's interpretations in the 1970s, that in Sabæan and early Himyarite times, the snake was seen as a sacred animal, obviously not the shaitan in the Garden of Eden, a sacred animal largely associated with the deity called Wad. More recently, Ivona Gaida has confirmed this insights while also specifying that occasionally the snake sometimes could also be associated to Athar and other deities. Snake imagery may occur in singular representations, as in this bronze statuette that you see here, but more often in two-dimensional and relief decorations as intertwined pairs of couples in higher quantities. Sometimes, as Sabina Antonini has demonstrated for the Banat Ad temples, the snake's symbols indicate an explicit reference to fertility. From the work of Anne Benoit in the peninsula's southeast, we also know that under the pre-literate conditions there, the snake's religious symbolism was equally widespread in Iron Age too, and clearly was connected to rituals and ceremonies that had to do not with death, but with life. So the synopsis of our ethnographic evidence seems to largely confirm and enrich what the real experts from philology, from archaeology and art history, such as Sabatini, Benoit and Gaida, have elaborated as a valid but still fragile line of interpretation. Our ethnographic examples indicate that the snake, sometimes as a white jinn, is at the service of Allah by guarding a spring. It is seen as close and sensitive to the return of the moist season and as symbolizing the ritual transition into a desirable future of wealth and fertility. Being situated between risk and hope, human attitudes to the snake in these ethnographic examples therefore substantiate and enrich the points already suggested by our colleagues in epigraphy, archaeology, and art history. In fact, Wad was representing the moon, and therefore his intersection with the Sabaean and Himmerite calendars was unavoidable, since these were lunar solar calendars, as discussed in some detail earlier this year at the Rabat conference hosted by Athirat. By consequence, we may propose the logical chain of interconnected motives and themes that you see on screen here. It shows how the image of the snake, with some certainty, may have been associated with the hope for humans and agricultural fertility. As the outcome of our ethnographic approaches to this particular element in the fauna of ancient South Arabia, we therefore arrive at the conclusion that the snake was a fertility symbol associated to important deities in people's religious cosmology. We may end by pointing out it was because of its fertility symbolism that the snake in reliefs was shown in couples of high quantities, entangled with each other, emphasizing the aspect of fertile abundance. Thank you for your attention.